In this lecture, we are going to see an overview of how to navigate in SAP. This is the window we are going to find once we access to SAP. And we are going to see the different parts that we can distinguish. First of all, we have a menu bar in the top of it. This is going to be present in all transactions. Each transaction is each one of the different functionalities in which it is divided SAP. So for instance, for creating a material, we have a transaction. For changing it, we have another one, and so on. Next, we can see the navigation bar, where we can see different tools, different buttons for changing from one transaction to another, for printing, for searching, etc. We have the title bar, where it is going to be printed, or we are going to see the transaction in which we are and some additional information. We have the application tools bar. This is going to be different depending on the transaction we are. And here we are going to see the most used functions in buttons for using them easily when we are working. These same functions, we are going to be able to use them from the menu bar, but here it is going to be faster for using them when we need it. And then we have the main window when we are going to see the information. In this case, we are in the SAP menu, in the main menu, and well, we are going to see later, but we have different menus, one for favorites and one for all the different SAP transactions. And finally, in the bottom, we have the status bar that we are going to see also later. This is when we enter to a transaction. For instance, in this case, we are in the display material transaction. We are going to see that we have the same parts. We have the menu bar, but now if you pay attention, we have some different options. Others are equal. We have the navigation bar. This is exactly the same in all transactions we are. The title bar, of course, the title is going to change, and we can have additional information about the material or the transactional data or master data where we are. Application tools bar, where we have buttons that are specific to this transaction. The main window, where we see all the information with which we are going to interact, and the status bar. So we see the same parts as we saw in the menu, in the main menu. So here we see the main menu, and as we have already seen, we have two different parts. One is the favorites, where it is possible to define a different menu, a personalized, customized menu, where we can enter the transactions we used more usually. We can organize them in different folders, and we can also change even the description for being able to identify them easily. And on the other hand, we have the SAP menu, where we have all the SAP transactions that we can use, all available SAP transactions for a user, not for customizing. And normally in no implementation, all of them are going to be used. So, and one user is only going to use some of them. So it is not needed to use it, but sometimes it is easy when we are searching for new transactions or during the implementation. Normally, it's going to be easier to create a favorites menu or to use an SAP user menu that is configured normally for each workplace, for each job. We can have a different user menu which is going to be a menu like this one, but only with the transactions that are going to be used by that job. The menu bar, this is the first bar that we see in the top. Here we see the menu bar for the main menu. We see that we have two options, System and Help, that are going to be present in all transactions. In System, we can access to some common tools like reporting, and in Help, we can access to different options for getting help for SAP. And then we have the rest of options that, as we say, they are going to be different depending on the transaction we are. In this case, we're going to see the ones for the main menu. The first one in menu, we can decide if we are going to access to the SAP menu or to the user menu. As we have already seen, we can have a specific menu for a workplace. And we can also access to the workplace, that this is in SAP like an entry box where we can receive the workflow items or some messages from the systems. In Edit, we can decide if we are going to run a transaction in the current window or in a new one. We can have different sessions. We can work with different sessions in SAP where we can run different transactions. Normally there is a limit, about 5 or 6 that we can open at the same time, but this allows us to make some copy and paste from one or another, or just to check some information while we are updating other information and other transactions. Favorites, this is for organizing and for managing favorites, the same that the buttons we saw in the application tools bar. And extras, where we can enter some general configuration options for navigation. And extras can also appear in other different transactions. Navigation tools bar, we see is this bar that we see here. And here we can see the different options. With this one, we can continue or run or validate depending on what we are doing. In this text box, we can enter directly the transaction code where we want to go, or we can enter other type of commands that we can run them immediately. Save, in those cases where we are in a transaction where we can save the data we have entered, we have to use this button for saving. Back one step, this is for just going back to the last window where we were. Exit current transaction, this is going to take us out of the transaction where we are. Cancel, to go back cancelling without saving. Print, just for printing what we see in the main window. Search, for searching a text. Search next, once we have found the search we were looking for, we can press it again for searching more the same text. In those cases where in the main window we have different pages, we can use these 4 buttons. The first one for going to the first page, this to the previous page, to the next page, or to the last page. This is going to be used for opening a new session. As we have already seen, we can have different open sessions at the same time. Direct access, we can create a direct access in our desktop for accessing directly to SAP, but to the transaction that we want. Help, to get help, and some options, normally options of the SAP graphical user interface of how to interact with the system. Title bar, in the main menu we are going to see this test, SAP EC Access, but in each transaction we can have different tests. In this case, for instance, we are seeing an attachments menu, the transaction menu, the transaction description, the material number, and the material type. Application tools bar. Here we can see the different buttons that we are going to use in the main menu. In this case, we can access directly to the user menu, to the SAP menu, to the workplace, which it is like a entry box where we can receive workflow items. We can add a favorite, a transaction as a favorite, or we can remove one, and we can change the text in a favorite we have already saved. And we can also use these two buttons to move one favorite transaction or one folder favorite transaction up and down. In the rest of transactions, we are going to have different buttons. In this case, we are seeing the one we saw in the display material, and here we can switch material. This button is used for switching. It can be a material or it can be another different object. Additional data to see more data about this master data, and organizational levels just to select different organizational levels in this master data or in this transactional data if you were in one transactional data transaction. Main window, in this case we are in the main menu, and we can see here the same transaction, the display material, where we can see that we have different elements like folders, buttons, text boxes or check boxes, radio buttons, etc. And finally, status bar, that is the bar that is in the bottom, where in the right corner we can decide which field we want to see. This is going to be visible in all transactions. Here we can decide to see the transaction code, in this case MM03, but we can also decide to see the user. Imagine we are working with different users, or we can decide to see the client or the system. Imagine that we are working with the development, and at the same time you have some sessions of the production open at the same time. So depending on how we are working, it can be more useful or not to use one or another parameter. This is going to be visible from all transactions. And finally, in the left side, the system will show information, warning, and error messages.